today is, what's the date today, Nori?
It's something like the 4th of July.
4th of July. Happy Independence Day to America, eh?
Aye.
I'll bet they're glad they left the United Kingdom, eh?
When's our turn, Gordon? When will it be our turn? Come on.
As soon as possible, Nori. Now,
Yeah.
I think we were talking about going through the questions arising from the last programme before we started today's programme. So what have our viewers been telling us about our last episode?
Well, it's a mixed bag as ever. People are agreeing with the majority of what we're trying to say, the messages we're trying to put across. But there was a few that really did stand out, really good ones. I'll just get them here if I can. Rachel Taylor said, we were talking about SNP 1 and 2, not a good idea and all the rest of it, but she says, look, we have to advertise the fact that the ballot paper is wrongly worded. It says first vote is the person you want as your MSP. The second vote asks what party do you want. This is how you get SNP 1 and 2 very easily. So it's very easy for people to slip into that. Oh, SNP, they see it, then they vote for it. But that's the wrong thing to do.
Right. So just out of curiosity, who is it who decides on the wording which says how you should use your ballot paper? Would that be the Scottish Government by any chance?
I think it's the Electoral Commission, is it not?
Right, because it does sound like it's been very carefully worded to give you the impression that you should vote SNP 1 and 2. So I definitely agree with our viewer there. It sounds to me like a pockle, as we would say.
So we've got to be very careful when we go into vote, Gordon. What you see in front of you might confuse you a bit, but go in, educate yourself with the intent to vote SNP 1 and another party 2. It doesn't mean you have to vote SNP 2 because it says it on the ballot paper, because it's asking you to vote for the party. That's the problem. V. King says, yes, this is so. I believe people get confused and mark the wrong box. Can you imagine seeing Indie for Indie, Sovereignty, ISP, etc. on the regional paper? Unless you agree to stand only one candidate out of all the parties, it's going to be tough. Helen McGowan says, voting for independence parties is a must in 2026. However, I remain undecided if I'll be able to stomach again voting for the SNP because I don't trust them to do as we demand. We need strong assurances from the SNP that they will work with other independent parties, not betray us again by working, with unionist parties and setting the agenda until 2050. Quite strong stuff there from Helen. Andy, he's saying, having supported the SNP every election for 50 years, I've lost faith in their commitment to Scottish independence. Despite holding power and repeated mandates, they have failed to deliver tangible progress. Robert Mathieson is in the same thing. He's left the SNP. They have become unionist by their blot on independence. They managed to stay in power by their treachery in asking the voters to give them both votes.
So we're seeing more of these people who are long-term members of the SNP waking up and realising what's happened to the party that they used to love. It's a crying shame. It really is.
It is, Gordon, but it explains in explicit views there from these people that the general election where the SNP lost most of their MPs wasn't an overnight thing. It was a gradual realisation from people that they weren't doing as they were voted in to do. And then we saw at by-elections, the SNP vote is gone. They're wanting something else. You don't deliver what they want and they won't vote for you. Can I go through another couple of things just to make on that? It's about Craig Murray. Another thing we said about Celtic and Rangers fans not Celtic fans not voting for the union, but Rangers fans were. It's a funny old world. Well, Celtic fans have come on and says, hey, I'm a Celtic fan and I'm an Indie supporter. Joseph says that. Issue Boyton, it's because of the union flag the Rangers use for the football team. We think they're unionists, but that covers up a lot of stuff. Let's see, great show as always. I'll go through all them ones. We have to advertise. Douglas says, there is Liberate Scotland. This is not a political party, but it's a group consisting of ISP, Independents for Independence and Sovereignty, MSP candidates standing in Holyrood 26. Please look into and spread the word of this organisation, as this is exactly the unity, strength, strategy and commitment that Scotland needs right now. Well, I thought we were doing that, Gordon.
We
That's what we're doing.
You need to hammer it home that Liberate
Yeah.
Scotland is a political alliance of parties, and it's not liberate.scot.
Yeah, there's a couple, Gordon, you might want to look at as well. A. Martin says the UN stuff is laughable. It's going nowhere. I want to ask Gordon what his vision is for an independent Scotland. What would its values be? How would being independent improve the lives of Scottish people?
Is this from the same viewer?
No. This is another one.
Okay.
This is Martin. I don't know what he's been watching over the last months, Gordon, when you've been on. He must be new. I don't know.
I think so. Well, give him time, Norrie, and maybe he'll figure it out over the next few watching it. But yeah, I think we made our positions pretty clear over the weeks and months.
I think so, Gordon.
Is that all of our questions, or is there anything else that came up?
There is other ones. A lot of people are supporting us and like what we do, but I don't think we should be mentioning all that. It just wastes our time, Gordon. We've only got an hour. So thanks to all people who drop a comment for us, good or bad. If you might think it upsets us, don't think that, because we can learn. Even we can learn from things that people put in.
Now, I understand, Norrie, that you had a story concerning Angus Robertson this morning.
I did. This baffles me, Gordon. I'll run it past you. He was in a session in the Parliament, and he's Culture Secretary, Angus Robertson. And he came out. He says it's easier to learn about Scotland's green hydrogen industry from German television than from UK broadcasters. Culture Secretary Angus Robertson told a room of journalists and editors at Holyrood last Thursday. The remark was a stark reflection on the state of Scotland's media, one that grew sharper as Robertson continued. Where have you been, Angus? Have you just woken up to this? The fact that there is no broadcast service in Scotland? Gordon, this is abysmal from the SNP. Seriously.
My first reaction to this piece of news this morning was, do bears defecate in forests? Because the one thing that's most obvious, right, to everybody in Scotland is that we do not have a free media. And Angus Robertson has been in post how many years now? And now he's figured this out?
Yeah.
He's the most incredibly stupid politician that's ever been elected to Holyrood. Or this is just mince. This is just a bit of fluff to fill the airwaves.
It is, Gordon.
Journalists that are not doing their job as independent reporters. They're not going to take.
Can I add a wee bit more to this, because it's there's a new fledgling Scottish Public Interest Journalism Institute getting set up.
Is this
whatever that is? Yeah. It's to be set up next month or thereabouts, and it was recommended by the Scottish Government, its own public interest group. Here's the thing, Gordon, a wee story for you, right? When I was working on Caledon Radio, I was getting all kinds of political parties from all over the world chatting with me on air. And one particular guy, a progressive conservative over in Canada, Nova Scotia, would join me regularly to tell me what was happening in Canada and what was happening in Scotland and could we compare. We're getting great discussions. And one day, he Facebooked me. He gave me a message on Facebook saying, "Oh, excitedly, guess who's coming to Halifax, Nova Scotia?" And he showed a picture. "Do you know this man?" It was Angus Robertson. I said, "Oh, yes, I know Angus Robertson." I says, "Jamie, ask him if he's heard of Caledon Radio." And Jamie says, he's bound to have heard. If I've heard over in Canada, and Paul Plamont, the Quebec Party leader, heard of us? Why hasn't Mr. Robertson heard of us? You know? So he thought it'd be a nice icebreaker talking about Caledon Radio over the lunch or the dinner it was in the meeting. And Angus Robertson had no clue. And Jamie Bailey was astounded. He says, "You have no media." This Caledon Radio, in his words, were writing Scotland's story, the true story. And if Scotland can't write its own story, why do you leave it to others? And Angus Robertson said nothing and moved the debate on. But Jamie told me all this. And I just thought, you don't want a media. You do not want, obviously you don't want one. Because you would have been working non-stop. This would have come out 10 years ago, Gordon, if he was serious about it.
Do you think, Norrie? I mean, the more I hear about politicians like Angus Robertson, the more I'm convinced that the United Kingdom, when it set up Holyrood, had it in mind not only to make sure it didn't have any actual power to do anything particularly other than just run its internal economy, but I think the secondary idea behind Holyrood was to make sure that the people who were elected to it were idiots, that were political pygmies who had no clue how to run a country and had no interest at all in whether Scotland became independent or didn't. In other words, look for career politicians who have no other interest outside of their own self-interest and their own party's interest. And in doing that, they basically condemned that whole parliament to being a tiny fishbowl where nothing ever changed, where all of these people will just swim around in the same little pond and ignore all the reality around them. And that seems to be exactly what you've described with Angus Robertson, that he's unaware. I mean, a man in his position of Culture Secretary should be more aware than anyone else in Scotland of just how bad the British media is in Scotland and why we must have an independent media. He should not be setting up subcommittees. He should be basically saying, we need our own media now, and we are going to set it up, and we're going to make sure we have a free Scottish TV channel, which is not politically linked to Westminster in any way at all. It's time to defy Westminster, not to go along with it.
Oh, exactly.
So many decades, and look where it's led us, you know?
Yeah. You're bang on. It's about time we grew a backbone and said, you know what, get lost. Keir Starmer, who do you think you are? Rachel Reeves, who do you think you are? Telling us, the great Scots, what we can and can't do. But you're right, Gordon, because we've got these lick-spittle Egypts in the Parliament, bowing and scraping to their lords and masters who pay them the fortunes that they earn, we get nowhere. And meanwhile, 1 in 4 kids in Scotland are in poverty. Our roads are a mess. People are dying on them. But yet, we're not the Tories.
Yeah, but Westminster has made sure that the only party which can win enough seats to form a government in Scotland, which isn't one of their parties, is the SNP. They want the SNP to be the only party of independence because it means they've only got one target to aim for. I noticed that a few commentators recently, I think including Peter Bell, had made the point, and another writer actually in the National made the same point, that when we were successful under Alex Salmond, it was because all of the pro-independence voters were united behind Salmond. Salmond had a clear view of what he wanted to do, and he didn't take any orders from Westminster. He did things without their permission. They built the Queen's Ferry crossing without their okay. He did things that nobody else has done since. And that was the difference. We need another charismatic leader who can actually bring everybody together and do the things that people are demanding. And at the moment, as Peter Bell pointed out, there is nobody in the SNP, certainly, who could do that. They are all full-time third-raters who are basically in it for the salaries and in it for the careers. And that's Westminster wants to keep it. And this is why Holyrood is not a Scottish Parliament. It never has been. It's a British colonial office running Scotland on behalf of London. And that's all those politicians are there to do, really, is to do just that. Until we change those politicians out, nothing can change at Holyrood at all. That Parliament is effectively not Scottish and will remain not Scottish until we do something about it.
Correct, Gordon. When you've got people like Annie Wells in the Scottish Parliament, we can't even ask a question without falling over our own feet. And she used to puff cushions in Marks and Spencer's, and she got on the list in a few thousand votes, and now she's making big decisions for the people of Scotland. You're right, Gordon. There's just idiots in that Parliament, seriously, on all sides, who are bound and scraping. And I tell you this, they will never ever get that kind of money and that kind of status in any other walk of life that they choose to partake in. It's too good for them, and to keep on that gravy train, they'll just do as they're told.
Yeah, now our politicians, our political class who make up the government in the Scottish Parliament, the so-called government, are earning about £93,000. They're earning almost 4 times the national average wage to do absolutely nothing, but come up with weird little subcommittees that look at things like why the journalism in Scotland is so crap and does precisely nothing about it.
Exactly.
They set up little talking shops to discuss things that people think are important, and then they abandon it. And that's how this goes.
Well, Gordon, what we'll do is we'll have a look at this this Public Interest Journalism Institute, and we'll over the weeks and months we'll feed back to what it's actually doing. I bet you wouldn't add up to a bag of beans what they've come out with.
I can tell you what it will be doing. They'll be talking to themselves about how bad it all is, and nobody will do anything about it because it's basically an echo chamber. It's a whining room where nothing happens. And that's the same for all of these subcommittees and all of these little quangos and talking shops that are set up in the Scottish Government which do precisely nothing. There is no other reason for them to exist other than to make it look as if our politicians are actually doing something for the money they're getting. It's job creation for politicians, and it moves the needle nowhere in terms of liberation.
Bang on. Bang on.
There was a bit of news I wanted to add into the mix today, Nori, something I was looking at in my news feeds this morning, and it's the case of the Ministry of Defence in Faslane. In the run-up to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ministry of Defence had been required to release information about radioactive pollution leaking from their submarines and being discharged into the lochs about Faslane and Coolport. And they used the occasion of lockdown to basically not do that, to not publish those figures. And it has taken until now, 5 years after COVID almost, for the Ministry of Defence to be forced to actually reveal these figures. And it's a senior Scottish judge has said that the Ministry of Defence's arguments that it would compromise national security to reveal this information were a load of nonsense, and that the only people it would be damaged by it were certain people's reputations. So he's now ordered the Ministry of Defence and he called it a Scottish Government agency to release the information that it's been withholding. It partially released some of the figures, but it concealed the actual levels of pollution from the nuclear facility at Faslane and Coolport. So that's meant to be happening now.
Well,
be seen whether it's of any use now, because it's 5 years too late to do anything.
Correct. So I can tell you, Gordon, up in Gairloch, I've just been up there for the last couple of days. The boat trip organizer, he owns a boat and he takes people out for boat trips.
Yeah, I do.
He's been doing that for about 20, 30 years, and he's noticed a change over the last 8 years. And do you know what that change is? They've been testing nuclear weapons up there in the Minch, where he takes people on the tours, and sometimes he can't get out because the submarines are in action, and the fishermen and all the boats have to clear out. And he says, "I would take you out and show you all the things, the gannets, the skuas, the orcas, whatever, but they've all gone. They've all gone, Gordon, because this nuclear testing sends frequencies right through the water that upsets the ecosystems. The whales and the orcas get disturbed by it and don't know where to go, and they veer across and they veer. So their natural grounds for travel have been interrupted so badly. The kelp is black on the sides of the water. It is a disgrace what they're doing, Gordon.
So,
And nobody is batting an eyelid.
no, these tests that you're describing, this sounds like some kind of emanations from these submarines, which are designed to confuse sonar primarily. Yeah. But you mentioned the blackening of the kelp beds. What did you mean by that? What was causing it? Does anybody know?
Nobody knows, but all he can tell you is 10 years ago, when it was a free and easy place, and he would take his boat up, you would see brown kelp, and you could smell the sea, and you could see the skuas, and you could see all the bird life there. He says the birds aren't coming anymore because there's nothing to fish for. The fish have gone. So if there's no fish, there's no birds. And he can only put it down to one thing. Ever since these tests started happening, that we've had problems. Now, this is one guy, right? His own views. This was never put out in a paper. This was never picked up by the newspapers in Scotland. This is not a big, huge issue. This is our country being used as a laboratory for these nuclear weapons. You know, Gordon, wake up, people, you know. And I've got another story. Gordon, I've got another story, if you can just bear with me on this. He states, right, up in Gairloch, this is another one, and it's a brilliant story from a local journalist. He's now found out that one of these states, now, every time you hear this word estates, be careful, because they own that land, not you. And they're now employing a Canadian drilling company to drill for gold and copper in Gairloch. Not once, Gordon, did we hear about the community. Not once did we hear about the people. Not once did we hear about what was going on and the destruction that would bring. It is a law unto themselves. And as soon as we get land reform or a land tax so that we can tax these people out of existence, then these things will be taken in and regulated by a government that we elect on our behalf. Right now, you can go to any estate and say, I'll dig in there for shale. I'll dig in your land for gold, copper, and you can do it. There's nothing to stop you because it belongs to the estate. It is a disgrace, Gordon, what's happening in Scotland.
The way that the land laws work in Scotland is if you own a parcel of land, then you also own the mineral rights for whatever's beneath that area of land, right? But, and this is the but, you can drill for it to see if it's there by prospecting and taking core samples. Mm-hmm. But if you want to open a mine to extract those minerals, you need to go through SEPA, the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, and they have to look at your application and say, yes, you can, or no, you can't. But that would be based on how pollution is controlled, how many trucks are going to be on the roads through the villages and the countryside, whether the road infrastructure can even carry that amount of traffic without breaking up. So there's a long way to go before any of that could happen. But I agree with you. It's shocking now that estate owners are now prospecting for precious metals and valuable commodities beneath their own estates. And I think that shows a bit of desperation, because they wouldn't need to do that if they were in the red. So why are they in the red? You know, they're obviously not making money. They're obviously not creating employment. So this is another sort of last throw of the dice for them to try and make some money out of the bit of land they've got.
Well, I can tell you, Gordon, all those fears you said, and SEPA would have to authorise this and all the machinations of it. But up in this part of the world, we've seen SEPA being railroaded, and wind farms are going up right, left, and centre. Now, on our roads, these big, huge construction lorries are carrying loads up wee country paths. On the main roads, you can't get past them. They're wide loads as well, and on the A82, sorry, that is a log jam right there.
Yes.
And tourists and locals trying to get to work can't do a thing because you're stuck behind us.
Well, I know you and I have talked about this issue before, and I just wanted to remind our viewers that there are actually over 7,000 land-based wind turbines in the Scottish countryside, and that number's growing all the time. And the only reason it's growing is because energy is a so-called reserved matter. In other words, the energy that we have in our environment is not under our control, but is exploited by Westminster. They have assumed the authority to do that, which means all these trucks, all these construction crews, all that mess, all that noise and fuss, all the breakdown of the natural environment is just going to keep going. And SEPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, can be overridden by Westminster through the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament and its agencies. They can just steamroller over any local objections they like and make it happen. And the only reason it's happening is because it's now been revealed that Scotland actually generates 7 times more electrical energy than it actually consumes. In fact, its whole energy infrastructure is 7 times bigger than the country can use. So where are the other 6/7 going? That's not mentioned in the report, but I think we can guess the lion's share is heading south. It's heading south to feed the insatiable lust for electrical power, oil and gas revenues that Westminster needs in order to maintain the country in the slowly declining state that it's in. So until we break free of them, none of these things can be fixed, as I think we all know.
Well, one of the things we need to get out of this union for as well is our transport infrastructure. A couple of weeks ago, Gordon, you may recall that we were we weren't directly in an accident, but we witnessed something ahead of us. Subsequently, we found out the motorcyclist had died. This is on the A82 for William Inverness Road. It is treacherous. It is small, too small for the modern car. The cars they're building right now are getting bigger and bigger. And you know what? Buses are getting bigger and bigger. Motorhomes are big. Lorries are big. So you've got big vehicles on this small road. And we're going to have accidents right, left and centre. I can assure you, Gordon, I'm not far from the fire station here in Drumnadrochit. And that thing opens up and the fire engines are away down one way or the other to any of the roads that feed onto the A82 because there's accidents. Unbelievable. Here's the thing, Gordon. There's a lot of reasons for all this. I've mentioned the big motors that are on the smaller roads, but people don't know how to drive them, and that's the thing. But equally, that road out there hasn't been improved since 1938, just before the start of the Second World War. Plans gone. After the war, not enough money. After that, there was something else, and it's been forgotten. It's just not been in part of anyone's radar. That's what you get when people vote for a parliament 500 odd miles away. They have no clue what's happening in the Highlands of Scotland, apart from when they came up to shoot and to lord it up here on us. It is a scandal.
I was just going to interrupt you there, Norrie, and say that it's not true that they don't know about the absolutely deplorable state of. I mean, to be honest with you, 1938 was the last time that road was actually built or improved in any actual. Right now, we've got 1938 roads in the 21st century. London knows fine well that that's the problem. But they don't care because it's so far away from them, it doesn't affect them, right? And it doesn't affect the Ministry of Defence. Take, for example, where I live near to Faslane and Coalport, there's a military road that was specially built by the United Kingdom only to serve the submarine base, not for local people.
Correct.
So the road's really good. But once you go past Coalport and you go past Faslane, the road deteriorates back down to its 1938 sort of levels again. They only care about it when it's something that they want to do. So unless we get rid of them and actually take control of our own road infrastructure, we can't improve it. And you and I know that most people who learn to drive in Scotland do so in towns and cities. like I do, people in a city, I very, very rarely get the opportunity to teach people to drive on a country road where the speed limit's 60, but the road doesn't always allow you to travel at that speed. And for the most part, the people who use the likes of the Northern 500 route to go on holiday, they hire camper vans, vehicles they've never driven before, and then they drive on roads that they don't understand, that they've never been trained to drive on, and so they start to make mistakes. They cause tailbacks. People get frustrated and try and overtake in the wrong places, and you end up with the sort of accident you described, where a motorcyclist on his own side of a road, I believe, wasn't he? And a camper van comes round a corner from the right, and he's on the wrong side of the road because he's moving too fast. And that motorcyclist is either dead or seriously injured, simply because nobody's trained that guy to drive the camper van. He might not even be British. He might be from outside the UK and is not used to driving on the left and may have forgotten. All of those things, I think you and I both know that that problem could be solved almost instantly by a major public information film made by the Scottish Government, highlighting the dangers to all drivers of country roads and how to drive them. It would be so easy to do a series of information films on how to drive on those roads. We need to do something about it.
Well, ultimately, Gordon, we need to get independence, because then we can have a root and branch look at our infrastructure, our motorway, our roads and rails. If you were to look at our map of Scotland with its rails and roads connections and compare it with Denmark or Austria, you'd see that their lines are going everywhere. We've got big empty spaces where lines should be. And it's because we're being neglected. And if we think in 2025, this is quaint, what else? Could Scotland do any better? Yes, we could. We could save lives being an independent Scotland. We could save lives.
But not only that,
a great thing to want, Gordon.
Well, the thing is, Nori, if we want our country, first of all, to be free and we want it to be successful, then that means the jobs have to stop being concentrated in the central belt. Industries need to move north. They need to move to places like Inverness. They need to move to places like Fort William, into the Central Highlands, into the northwest coast, onto the islands. And to do that, you need infrastructure links, because no business will set up anywhere where there aren't good transport links. And that means decent roads, decent rail infrastructure for carrying heavy goods and commodities like timber or gravel or whatever they need, right? So it would kickstart the internal economy if there was a major infrastructure project taken on by the Scottish Government, not just as a result of independence, but planning for it before the independence is actually achieved, so that you have all the pieces in place, you have the external investors ready to do it, you have all the companies lined up for the contracts, and then you can fire the starting pistol as soon as the political action's been taken, because I wouldn't want to build a new country based on the infrastructure we've got now. Scotland has the same kind of infrastructure it had when they made Whisky Galore. It's that bad.
I know.
It's a backwater. There are parts of Southern Ireland that were like that before Southern Ireland went through its big boom and joined the EU. But up until that point, Southern Ireland was very much like the north of Scotland. It was rural. It was devoid of any kind of investment at all. People just survived.
I've just returned from Southern Ireland, Gordon, and I can tell you that it's chalk and cheese between what they've got and what we've got. It's amazing what you can do when you've got your own powers and you've got your own people voting for you.
And you have all of your tax money to spend on it. Instead of giving 40% of all of your taxes to somebody else for absolutely benefit to you, it's being spent on things like high-speed rail links in London. You know, it's being spent on tunnels, it's being spent on bridges in England, none of which ever really do any good for Scotland whatsoever.
Not at all. The other thing, Gordon, it's not just our 882, there's 885, they've been A9. They're all here. Collisions, traffic in the area should be easing off, it says. And this is a daily thing. This is a local road thing I'm reading here. A82 remains closed in both directions to allow for collision investigation. So even if there's a crash, they have to keep it closed so that they can put all the pieces together to see how it happened. And then the thing is, Gordon, they divert you. And the diversion could mean a trip for us, coming from Inverness, going all the way up to Bewley again and coming down the Glen Road, coming back in, 25 miles.
Yes.
And here's the thing, Gordon, do you know this? Because all the traffic was getting diverted onto that wee road, another accident happened. That was closed as well.
Yes.
It is a shambles, a staggering shambles that we shouldn't be putting up with.
No, there are so many things that you could do to fix the situation. You could improve the roads, you can improve public information, you can improve driver training, but none of it can be done because even in my industry, the driver training industry is legislated by London. And we don't have any control over even what they ask us to teach. They changed the driving test against the better judgment of instructors a few years ago. And they took away a very basic manoeuvre that everybody knows, the 3-point turn, and they no longer test it. And they replaced it with a manoeuvre which we spent decades telling people never ever to do, which is to pull up on the wrong side of the road facing into the flow of traffic. But the London DVSA told us we had to teach people how to do that safely. And I still disagree with it to this day, even though I'm forced to teach people how to do this. And they asked me, why do I need to do this? Couldn't I just turn around and come back along the road and park properly? I said, of course you could. You don't have to do this. So why are we having to teach you it? Because maybe somebody in London's already doing it. You know, the people in London in parking spaces and are already parking on the wrong side of the road, and that's causing accidents. So the DVSA tells us in Scotland, where we don't have this issue, that we have to teach people to do this. Frankly, that's bollocks. You know, I don't mind not mincing my words here. We don't have a problem of parking as bad as that where we need to do it.
Do you know this, Gordon? I had to deal with the Ministry of Transport and to get my licence updated and all kinds of stuff and pay my road tax. And I remember being on a panel with Jean Freeman to work out how we could get people to get their benefits without any stigma attached and all the rest of it. And that worked really well. And I just thought, do you know this? If we had our own road tax system and the money went on our roads, our actual roads, rather than getting frittered away somewhere I don't even know, wouldn't it be a lot better, easier? If I had to deal with an Edinburgh, somebody could understand my accent for a start, and somebody who could understand what my problem was, with holes in the roads in my area. But no, it was a machine. They wanted to find out if I was a robot and all that kind of stuff. And you were just a name and a number. Just pay your money here and get lost. I hate this British system in every single facet it's got, whether it be trying to tax your car, trying to get your mortgage, trying to get anything from the Bank of England, putting rates up, inflation's through the roof. It's just not a good place to be.
No, I actually think that even before liberation happens, that the Scottish Government can legislate to ring fence a specific tax for use on the roads. Because if you look at it at a local level, most of the road repairs that are actually necessary are in places of high traffic, and that's usually cities. That's where the roads are worst, and local council estates. Now, if they introduced a legislation which allowed local authorities to charge a road tax, which would only be allowed to be spent on road repairs, they would have the money to do it. I know at the present time that Glasgow is probably one of the worst areas for road destruction that I've ever seen. Our roads are falling to pieces because A, they weren't repaired properly in the first place, they were done on the cheap. Sometimes they would just lay tarmac straight over the top of an existing road. And we all know that it doesn't stick when you do that. It won't stay down, it breaks up. But if the local authority had a ring-fenced, not quite a council tax, but a local road tax, then they could afford to properly repair the roads and they wouldn't have to delve into the Scottish Government's block grant to do it. And I'm pretty sure they could do that. I don't see any reason why it couldn't be done under local legislation. Could be done.
There's a couple of things, Gordon. I remember when there was a cycle race in Glasgow, and they were going out on the roads and out to Dumbarton and back.
2018.
And they had to make sure that the holes in the roads didn't affect the cyclists, and so they put the fences, the posts, the plastic posts, routed them past the holes.
Yeah,
and they got out to Dumbarton Way, came back again, and it was just as bad. And you know what? The legacy of that was nothing, because ordinary cyclists can't cycle on that road. It's too dangerous. But yet they closed it down for this big hurrah of all these cyclists who didn't enjoy the experience anyway, because it was too lumpy and bumpy. Now that tells you these cyclists came from all over Europe, and I bet you they've never come across worse roads than what we've got in Scotland, in the Highlands of Scotland.
It was embarrassing in Glasgow in 2018 because I saw that myself. The other thing I saw was that on Byres Road in Glasgow, one of the busiest shopping streets in the West End, there were potholes there, and the cycle route went down Byres Road. So the council was forced to temporarily fill those holes. They didn't have the money to do a proper repair before that race started, and that temporary repair remained in place for years afterwards. It was never properly fixed. They just shoveled some asphalt into the holes and tamped it down and steamrolled it, and it was just good enough to run the cycle race, but it was bumpy, and it was embarrassing, frankly. As a Glaswegian, to watch that race being run over such a horrible surface that had plainly just been bodged, And I'm thinking, why should we have to put up with being embarrassed by our own infrastructure any longer? And the Scottish government does nothing about it, nothing at all. They just, they delegate responsibility to local authorities and say, well, it's their fault. They're not repairing the roads. But then they don't give them enough money to repair the roads. The local council won't do it. In my area, they don't even cut the grass in the central reservations for about 4 months at a time. Laid off a lot of staff. They're not patching the worst, most egregious parts of the road system. If you travel ever through Annisland Cross in the West End, that junction, probably the biggest conventional junction in Scotland, hasn't been repaired, to my certain knowledge, for at least 15 years. And it's falling to bits. It's patched, potholed, it's cracked, it's rutted, it's falling to bits. Nobody touches it. Why not? Biggest city in Scotland, and they can't even patch a simple crossroads. There's something badly wrong with the way our transport infrastructure is maintained.
And do you know what's worse, Gordon? McAdam was a Scotsman. He was the guy that put tar on the roads. And we have inventors who invented the pneumatic tyre. Surely we can invent repair work that can last, even if it's using recyclable material. Wouldn't that be great if Scotland had control of its own powers and decided that all the waste rubber or whatever we had, I don't know how they work it, or plastics, can be used to fill in holes and have pristine, like Denmark. And we can do it because the Aberdeen Western Peripheral route, if you've ever been on that, Gordon, it's amazing. But that was Alex Salmon that done that. And he just decided that there was too many accidents happening up there. And it wasn't there was no connection between the villages in the city and the northern places like Fraserburgh and Peterhead and Stonehaven at the south. All sorted.
And why was it sorted? Because there was a charismatic leader who had the courage of his own convictions and made it happen. And that's all it takes. It only takes one individual at the top to make everybody else run around and do the job. And once you've got somebody like that, then you're okay. But I was going to say to you, you were talking about the idea of using waste plastic to make tarmac. India has been doing that for the last 12 years. They have a plant which takes unrecyclable plastic, like polypropylene bottles, polyester bottles, and it melts them down into a kind of sludge, mixes them with sand and aggregate, and produces a plastic tarmac from it. And it lasts for decades. And because it's plastic, it doesn't crack in the wintertime, whereas it does. It's also pretty much waterproof. and it's virtually indestructible. You know how difficult it is to destroy a plastic pop bottle? Well, imagine a road made out of that stuff and
Yeah,
sand. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We could have a plant at Grangemouth at the moment recycling all the waste plastic that we've got into new tarmac, and we could fill and resurface every road in the country with it for virtually the cost of the sand.
exactly, Gordon. But
The
as
cost of
long
the
as we're
sand is
ball and chain to this Westminster system, we have not got that opportunity. And so in 2026, we'll say it again till we're blue in the face, we have to make this an election that runs alongside Craig Murray's task to go to the UN with others, and we must fill it with pro-independence parties. Even if they have to have you kicking and dragging them by the hair to vote, to look at the independence campaign and not just stick to devolution plans. And that's why we need people like Eve Comrie, Colette Walker, John Hanna, etc., sovereignty guys in there, because that will stir up the nest. That will get people out of their easy seats and make sure they have to do things, because if they don't, the Scottish people will be on their backs. And we've got brilliant candidates that are going to go into that parliament and do the work that the SNP have not been doing, and taking the ideas that they have not been fermenting, and actually getting people like Common Weal involved with Scottish politics. Why wouldn't you get a pro-independence think tank who take every conceivable idea from different places and apply it to the Scottish context? Why would you not have them to lean on and to take ideas from? I mean, we're talking about transport this morning, Gordon. You've got a whole book on it, how you could fix it, how you could sort it. And you go to other countries and you see people in Germany, for example, in small towns, they've got two roads, one on top of each other. They've got boats that use the waterways with goods backwards and forwards. Could you imagine in Inverness, you're looking for a cargo of bricks or garden materials or whatever, and it comes over in the boat to the pier. But we don't have a boat. We don't have a pier. We don't have ideas. We have nothing. Why?
Yeah.
Come on. Get that boat next year and get us sailing towards independence, for heaven's sake.
I totally agree. Actually, you're mentioning Commonweal just reminded me that the key figure in Commonweal is, of course, Robin McAlpine. And Robin McAlpine, I think, given how good a communicator he is, and how good Commonweal is at actually laying out how to fix all of these problems, he should be running for election on behalf of Commonweal as their candidate. I know they're not a political party, but I think they could stand a candidate, at least one.
Honestly, Gordon, I don't think that's what these guys are about. They're not. They prefer to do.
I know they, but I'm just saying to you, I think that they should, because those are the kind of people you want in government. Those are the kind of people you want as transport and infrastructure ministers, and without them, you're not going to get those ideas done. And I think that is going to be vital in the future.
Gordon, there's people saying to me, I should be in the Parliament. I'm sure you get it as well. You should stand for the Parliament and all the rest of it. I don't want to. I honestly don't want to. I don't. Listen, that Westminster Parliament belongs to Westminster.
Not that Parliament. I would not want to be a part of that structure at all, because that is just selling out to the system. I know it sounds crazy to say this, but I'm not really scared of the SNP vote collapsing next year. In fact, I think it might be necessary in order for people to actually wake up politically and start thinking about the future, and not just blindly placing their faith in a party which has done precisely nothing for the last decade and a half. It's done nothing at all of any great importance. Yeah, it's run the country, but that's a management job. That's what Swinney is. Swinney is a manager. He's not a leader.
No, there's two things there, Gordon. Two important things there. If we realise that the SNP are not going to be returned in big numbers to the Scottish Parliament, that means we might get a Labour Reform Tory coalition, because it has to be a coalition. And then we can see them getting ruled by Westminster, and we can see a Jack McConnell trick. You'll put 1.5 million back because we couldn't spend it. You know what I mean? That's the kind of tricks. Will that be enough? Will that be enough to say no more? No more. And would it be enough for the SNP to think, right, we've been tossed out because why? It might make them return and think again who they actually are. Having said that, is that too much pain to go through? That's what we've got to decide. If it's not, and we vote them, then we have to hope that they're not a devolutionist party, and we've got to hope that Colette and Eve and John and all these other people that are hopefully getting presented in the Parliament have got enough in them to change the course of where the SNP are going. It's whatever happens, we're still in that Westminster extension. That Holyrood Parliament is theirs. We have to take an oath to the King because it says in the Scotland Act. We've got the Internal Market Act as well, Gordon, that dictates what happens to us. The Sewell Commission is gone. All these things that were set up in the start aren't there anymore. You have to get either in or out. Decide what you want to do. And the big players in all this are the SNP. And if they don't come to the table, Gordon, either with a convention or with ideas or a strategy or a plan, then you can say they're a busted flush. They're gone.
Political history is littered with failed political parties who stayed in power too long and switched off. And that's how political parties die. That's a pattern that repeats throughout history, and it will happen to the SNP, if not next year, at some point in the near future, because they're no longer what they used to be, and people now know that. And we're seeing that in the responses we're getting from SNP members to our programmes, that they realise now that the SNP is not the Independence Party now. It's some kind of managerial cabal that runs Scotland on behalf of London and is doing nothing.
Gordon, there's one thing that I've got to add here. It might be that's how it all plans out, because in Alf Baird's book, Doon Hodden, he explains that the Independence Party will be consumed, and then, just like India, they will fight for the British. It's when we've decided that is no longer for us, and the people, the Gandhis, and the people in the street take it on their own hands to do what they have to do.
That's right.
Then that is the start of your independence. And I honestly, I don't think people know, Gordon, at this point, how powerful they really are with one vote.
The statistics bear this out. Because what we're seeing now is the popularity of the SNP as a party diminishing now down to 30% what it once was. And at the same time, support for political independence of the entire nation has risen consistently, been above 50% all year. And that's a very conservative UK newspaper version of those figures. It's probably well beyond 60%. That will continue to rise as more people switch off the current political elite and abandon them and vote with their feet next year. We have to destroy what's holding us back before we can move forward. It's unpleasant, it's nasty, nobody wants the SNP to be destroyed, but it may happen anyway because people are so sickened by them that they're going to vote against them next year and they're going to vote for somebody else. And that's politics, that's how it works.
Well, we've seen this already, Gordon. We've seen it already.
Every political career ends in failure eventually. And the SNP is sliding towards that point now.
But Gordon, we said this before, if either of us were the First Minister, we'd be in a position where we'd be feeding off every single facet to gain support and gain momentum. We'd be talking to Commonweal. We'd be going round your doors and houses. If you're getting 80 grand, I'd be working every day of the week just about, because not just because it's an 80 grand job, but because we could be on the cusp of something magic. Just, John Swing, not worry about the kids that are going hungry or the old folk that getting cold in the winter. What is
I
your
I have one thing. I have one thing to remind people about, Nori, and all the things that we're discussing now that we know are possible and that we know we can do if we are free. Um, they are going to be possible now, but
Yep.
only because of what Salvo has achieved and what Craig Murray has started at the UN. Craig Murray formally started the procedure for requesting decolonisation status for Scotland. The first part of that has now been achieved. He's made the formal request. The
Yep.
formal documents have been lodged. The next stage is another plenary C24 committee meeting coming up very soon. Craig will be going back to both Geneva and the United Nations HQ in New York to make the formal application. And that is where the arguments contained in the documentation are presented by other members of the team. It's not just going to be Craig. His
No.
job was to make diplomatic contact and open the door. After that, there will be other representatives from Scotland representing liberation and representing the people and saying, we want to be decolonised. This is the proof that we presented to you. We're now going to argue the case. And then you make your deliberation and ruling. Once that's done, once they say, yes, you should be decolonised, there's nothing the UK can then do about it. And that frees both the population here to vote for parties that are not the SNP and to vote in people who they do want to action independence. And those politicians will know that they have the backing of the UN to take whatever action is necessary. And it will not involve the United Kingdom. It cannot do that.
No.
It can't interfere with decolonisation. It's not England's prerogative then. And
That's right.
What's changed.
That's right, Gordon. And I'm going to get the beer and the snacks. I'll be up all night for this. When Keir Starmer or whoever the lackey is that has to appear before the UN 24 committee and justify how Scotland isn't a colony. And I will laugh my head off at some of the responses that might come out. Oh, but we're free to vote. Yeah, is that right? Where's our language and our culture and all where's everything we ever owned? Where's it gone? Why is Aberdeen, the oil capital of the world, a mess? But London has got all these massive towers getting built all over the place in the middle. What is going on, Gordon? I think this is a reckoning, an awakening of people. And I'm really, really chuffed that folk are now realising that when you watch the parliaments, like even on Wednesday, you had Rachel Reeves crying because she couldn't implement her harsh policies. I couldn't care less. Time to get out of there and that stage, which it's just a theatre, and they're all acting parts. They're doing nothing for us. They're doing absolutely nothing, Gordon, except.
Yeah. Oh, you're frozen, Nori.
Reform of the saviours? Nah, they're not. They're just the idiots on the stage left. They're all that's left to come back. But there is if we don't get our independence by next year, we will be kicking ourselves, and we should be kicking ourselves. And I think, Gordon, when you said it's over 60%, the vote for, I think it's higher than that.
I agree. I was just saying that I think it's over that.
Gove said this freedom of information, they reckon it was 72, and that's why he wouldn't release it. He would not release that. 72%, Gordon. Now,
yes,
if I go down my street, which I do, and I speak to people over the fence, they're only talking about one thing. They hate Westminster. They hate the Labour Party. What's left for them to do then? Vote independence. But we're at this kind of crossroads because they don't like the SNP. But then when you tell them about Salvo and you tell them about the United Nations, you can see their hearts getting warm and you can see their eyes lighting up and think, tell me more about this. And that's what we've got to do. Buy Dune Hodden, the book. Buy it. Just have it in your house. Everybody take a turn in reading it. Because once you read that, it will identify what you've always probably thought was happening and brought it to life. And when you do read it, you will get angry, you'll be illuminated, and you'll be educated, and you'll have something for your back pocket whenever anyone asks you a question about Scotland being a colony. It's in the book. Doon Hodden, Alf Baird. Every house in Scotland should have it, Gordon.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've read Alf Baird's work. I've also listened to his speeches, and he basically describes exactly what we are at the moment and why we are this way, why we have this mindset, why we think of ourselves as the heroic failures, the underdogs, the ones who always come second, the ones who are not important in the UK, but we keep trying, we keep inventing and all the rest of it, but we never ever succeed. And it's all because not just the country's been colonised, but we have as well. Our entire attitude to ourselves and our self-worth has been formed by the United Kingdom's narrative, telling us that we're not good enough, we're not smart enough to run ourselves, we're not wealthy enough, we're not big enough. All of that stuff we know is lies now. And I think we're way past the point where we believe that too stupid and too.
I've got a message, Gordon.
Yeah.
Somebody says, who's going to recognise next year's Scottish Parliament as a de facto independence referendum? No one. Actually, the UN will.
Nobody. Yeah. Because
the UN.
Yeah, the UN won't recognise it either, Norrie, because it's an election. And the British state, despite the fact that I hate them, will correctly point that out and say it doesn't matter that you voted in what you think of as a de facto referendum and majority, you just elected some politicians. We're not going to give you your independence because we don't have to, because it was an election.
But here's the thing, Gordon. If those politicians stand on an independence ticket, then you can say we voted those politicians because they're all voting for independent. They are independent supporting politicians. That carries weight. That carries weight.
It carries weight with the UN, and it will carry weight with the UN as long as we do just that. But it will not get us our independence straight away. That has happened through decolonisation, because the UK will not accept any other means.
But Gordon, if you go to the UN, and you go through the UN Colony 24 committee and it's identified that Scotland is a colony, but at the same time they're looking, but your Parliament doesn't suggest that's the case. Are the people really wanting this, or is it just a handful? You've got to make sure that every part of the jigsaw is in place, so that when they look across, they go, look, they all voted for independence parties. They're ready. We must do something.
Yeah. Well, listen, Norrie, as usual, have overrun our time this morning, but it's been an excellent programme, and I hope everybody enjoyed the content today. So, of course, we'll be back again, we hope, next week, Norrie, same day, Friday at 9:30, with some new topics. In the meantime...
Can I just remind people, Gordon, to put the comments in? Keep going. They're all positive. No matter if you think they're not positive, we'll read the best ones out. And remember to click and like and share, because do you know this, Gordon? Just before you go, Holyrood sources a podcast like ours and get paid a lot of money, and they don't get as many people following them and liking them as we do. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that you cannot formalise things for people anymore. You cannot get John Swinney and Anna Sarwar on at different times and just hear the same old garbage, and pat them on the back for what they're doing. No, you've got to make sure that when you're on a podcast like this, you question things all the time. And I'm sorry if that upsets people, but we must keep going, Gordon. We must keep going.
Absolutely. Well, listen, it's time to go. Thanks again, Norrie, for being my wingman on this, and I look forward to next week's show. I don't know what the next week's show is going to be yet, neither of us does, but thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
All the best, Gordon. Look after yourself. Bye now.
Bye everyone.